The boardroom went dead silent when I walked in. They weren't expecting me, certainly not with a folder marked Merger Offer, Urgent. Eli. The CEO, who once called me a relic from another era, turned pale. One director even whispered, "Is this legal?" I just smiled. They had no idea that I now owned a piece of the company that was about to buy them. The call came at 8:45 a.m. I was finalizing a slide deck for next quarter's operations review when my desk phone rang. The voice on the other end was sharp, deliberate. "Ms. Cross, the executive board needs you in conference room B, right now." There was no meeting on the calendar. I walked down the 12th floor hallway. Quiet. Too quiet. No nods from junior analysts. No morning banter from the admin team. Just silence and sidelong glances, like they knew something I didn't. When I reached the door, it was already closed. I knocked once and entered. Inside, Eli Bardem, our new CEO, mid-30s, Silicon Valley polish. 2 VPs flanked him. No coffee cups, no notepads, just a sealed envelope on the table. "Delaney," Eli said, not standing. "You've been the backbone of Novantum for nearly 3 decades, and that legacy will never be forgotten. But the board and I agree. It's time for a graceful transition, an early retirement." Graceful. The word hung in the air like a curtain falling. I looked at the others, eyes down. One of them, I'd trained him 12 years ago. He couldn't even meet my gaze. I didn't speak, just nodded once, took the envelope, turned and walked out. Not a single word from anyone. Downstairs. I stopped by the executive assistant's desk and handed her a flash drive. "Q2 performance brief," I said. "Completed last night, it's all in there." She took it with shaking hands, not sure whether to say thank you or goodbye. In my office. I shut the door, opened my laptop, and accessed the internal HR dashboard to finalize access transfers. That's when I saw it. My name, gone from the leadership directory. Last updated 6 days ago. 6 days ago. Before today's discussion. Before the envelope. Before the staged performance. I clicked into a pending newsletter draft, scheduled to send the next morning. We thank Ms. Cross for her years of service and wish her a restful retirement. A new chapter begins at Novantum. There were no photos, no farewell message, just an erasure. I closed the laptop, picked up my bag, walked to the elevator. As I waited, hands still, face expressionless, I whispered something under my breath. Not a threat, not a promise, just the truth. They think this is the end. I didn't cry in the boardroom. I didn't cry when I handed over my flash drive or packed my bag. I didn't cry when I stepped into the elevator for the last time. My name already scrubbed from the company directory, but I cried the moment I closed the front door to my house. Not because I'd lost a job, because they'd tried to erase me. The lights stayed off. I sank onto the edge of the couch, still in my blazer. The envelope marked early retirement package clenched in my hand. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened TV screen, eyes red-rimmed, mouth flat, shoulders still squared, as if I hadn't quite let go of my armor. I had given them 27 years, and they'd given me a printed letter and a timed press release. No farewell lunch, no handshake, not even a hallway nod. I stood and walked to my home office. The room hadn't changed in years. Oak bookshelves, a corkboard cluttered with photos, a desk still stacked with old journals and blueprints. I reached for the framed picture on the shelf. My first team, Novantum, 2003. We were standing outside the old warehouse with our arms around each other, back when we celebrated milestones with BBQ and folding chairs. Below it, a yellowing sketch, my first logistics routing model, drawn on graph paper and taped together at the seams. It had formed the backbone of Novantum's growth. Nobody even mentioned it anymore. I traced the lines with my finger. Too old-fashioned, Eli had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe the future belonged to flashier things. But even flash fades. In the far corner of the room sat an old metal cabinet. I hadn't opened it in years. The key still hung from the underside of my bookshelf. I unlocked it slowly, unsure what I was even looking for, until I found the small wooden box tucked inside. It was smooth, walnut-colored. No label, just weight. Inside, a folded piece of paper. My breath caught. Michael's handwriting, my husband, gone 6 years now. I unfolded the page carefully. The paper crackled. The ink had faded slightly, but his voice returned instantly. Delaney, if you're reading this, it probably means you're at a crossroads you've spent your life building. But if they ever forget who you are, don't you dare forget. If they don't see your worth, it doesn't mean you've lost it. You taught me that. Never let them silence your legacy. Never give them that permission. Michael. The tears came again, but softer this time. Not grief, not anger. Resolve. I folded the letter and held it tight to my chest. Then I stood, slipped it into my bag, not back into the cabinet, and returned to my desk. I opened my laptop. No emails, no dashboards, no calendar reminders. Instead, I searched for something else. Novantum shareholder disclosures. A spreadsheet popped up. Quarterly data. Investor lists. Minor stakeholders. I stared at the screen. Maybe I was too old-fashioned for TikTok brainstorms and agile stand-ups, but not for this. Legacy doesn't disappear, I whispered. You just have to remind them who it belongs to. And I would. Not with press releases, with power. The call came while my coffee was still brewing. The screen lit up. Isaac Legrand. I hadn't spoken to Isaac in nearly 2 years. He used to run R&D at Novantum, a brilliant, meticulous engineer with little patience for shortcuts or showmanship. We'd started around the same time, survived 3 leadership overhauls, and once spent 26 hours in a server room rebooting an entire logistics grid. I hesitated, then picked up. Delaney, he said, voice dry but steady. How's early retirement treating you? I didn't answer. Right, too soon, he added. Well, I just joined the club, yesterday. I blinked. You're kidding. Apparently, he said. My methods are too linear, and my feedback style lacks emotional agility. Translation. I don't slap emojis on Slack messages. I let out a breath somewhere between a laugh and a groan. They let you go? Walked me out like I'd stolen something. 23 years. And I didn't even get a mug. There was silence between us for a few seconds. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy, familiar. The kind that sits between people who've both been pushed off the same cliff. They're gutting the place, he said finally. Not just people, principles. I checked the new release of the routing AI. It's built on the same logic we developed back in 2008. With extra fluff, I added. Fluff that breaks when it scales, he muttered. They'll find out soon enough. Another pause. You okay? He asked. No, I said honestly. Not really. It's not just the job. It's what they made it mean, like we were some outdated line of code. Exactly, he said, like legacy is a virus. We sat in the silence again. My eyes wandered to the desk, where Michael's letter still sat folded beside my notebook. You know, Isaac said, his tone shifting. I've been thinking, what if we're not the broken ones? I tilted my head. What do you mean? I mean, what if it's not us who've failed to keep up, but them who failed to hold on to anything real? They want disruption? Fine. But we built the damn infrastructure. We were the disruption, once. That stirred something in me. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say it out loud. What if we created something else? He said, quietly now. A space not ruled by ageism or ego, just execution, Clean work, real systems, no ping-pong tables. I smiled. You're talking about a company? Maybe not yet. Maybe just a group. But I've already called 2 people who were pushed out. They're in. In for what? To talk, to reconnect, to remember what we know and what they forgot. And maybe build something that makes them wish they hadn't let us go. I was quiet. He didn't push, just waited. My gaze drifted to the shareholder report, still open on my laptop. Names, numbers, gaps, and potential. I thought of Michael's letter. Never let them silence your legacy. Maybe this was how legacy speaks, quietly at first, then louder when it gathers. If we do this, I said slowly, we don't do it with bitterness. We do it with precision. That's why I called you, he said. And if we build anything at all, it's going to be designed to last. No press stunts, no glossy branding, just structure. I'm tired of being erased, he said. Then let's give them something they can't overwrite, I replied. I pulled out a fresh page in my notebook and wrote 3 lines. People we trust, knowledge they forgot, what Novantum left behind. Then I looked out the window. The sun was rising. Light hit the edge of the letter on my desk. If we're the past, I said softly, maybe it's time we redefine what the future looks like. The house smelled like cinnamon and old paper. I cleared off the dining table and laid out what I could. Coffee, notepads, pens, water glasses, and a whiteboard I hadn't touched in years. The room was warm but tense. I had no idea if this would work. All I knew was, they said yes when I asked them to come, by 9 o'clock. They arrived one by one. Isaac came first, carrying a laptop and a notebook so battered the spine was barely holding together. Then Marcia, once our international client relations head, fluent in 4 languages and sharp as ever. Carl followed, tall and quiet, the kind of operations genius who never needed to raise his voice. Theo, the former East Coast finance director, arrived with a folder already color-coded. Linda brought banana bread. And Raj walked in with nothing but a flash drive and that half smile that always meant he knew more than he was letting on. 7 of us, all over 50, all discarded, all once considered irreplaceable. We sat down without ceremony. Nobody needed introductions. I didn't expect to feel nervous, Linda said, breaking the silence. But here we are. You're not alone, Marcia added. It's like we've been pulled out of the pages of a company obituary. An obituary they wrote before we were dead, Isaac muttered. We shared a dry laugh, one of those half-pained, half-freeing chuckles that come when bitterness softens into solidarity. I stood at the whiteboard, drew 3 circles that overlapped slightly. This is where we're starting, I said. What we built. What they broke. What we still hold. Everyone leaned in a little closer. I didn't call this meeting out of nostalgia, I said. I called it because we are still valuable, whether Novantum admits it or not. We don't need revenge. We need relevance. On our terms. There was a pause. And how exactly do we reclaim that? Theo asked, tapping his pen. That's when Raj finally spoke. By knowing what they don't think we know. He plugged his flash drive into the laptop and projected a file onto the TV behind me. Q2 risk report, internal use only. My heart stopped. You still have access? I asked. I never sold my shares, he said. 1.2%. Not enough to shout, but enough to listen in. The room froze as the document loaded. $12 million in active liability. A botched rollout of their AI routing system had triggered late delivery penalties across 3 major client contracts. 1 class action lawsuit was already in legal review. They were bleeding and hiding it. This isn't public yet, Raj said. They're stalling quarterly disclosures, probably hoping to patch the holes before shareholders notice. How long before it becomes unpatchable? Carl asked. 2 quarters. Tops, Theo replied. If they don't restructure or sell part of the operation. It was quiet again, but this time, not with doubt, with opportunity. So we don't need to fight them, Isaac said. We just need to be ready when they fall. Or, Marcia added, we build something stronger before they do. Linda nodded slowly. Then we need a name, a structure, an entity. We all looked around the table. Nobody said no. Legacy equity, Marcia suggested. The words hit with a quiet weight. Not flashy, not angry, just true. I turned back to the whiteboard and wrote it in thick black marker. Legacy equity. We don't have to be louder, I said. We just have to be undeniable. 7 heads nodded. 7 minds realigned. The room didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a storm was coming, and this time, we'd be the ones steering it. The first crack wasn't loud. It came in the form of a glitch, buried in a system Novantum swore was smarter than anything we'd ever built. The news didn't make headlines, but it made its way to me through something stronger than the media. Whispers. Carl was the one who spotted it first. He forwarded an industry bulletin, an internal memo from a regional shipping partner, missed routing deadlines, conflicting destination codes, orders rerouted through the wrong states. The source? Novantum's new AI system. The very system I'd warned them against deploying too quickly. I sat back in my chair and read the memo 3 times. The language was vague, deliberately so, but I knew exactly what it meant. Their shiny new rollout had failed its first real test, and clients were noticing. At our next meeting, I shared the news with the others. The mood wasn't celebratory, it was focused. We built redundancy into the original framework, Carl said. They stripped it out. Because it slowed down response time by half a second, Isaac added, shaking his head. Half a second. For what? A marketing slide? Raj was already cross-checking the supplier names with legal filings. 2 of the partners listed here have arbitration clauses, he said. If they sue, Novantum's liability jumps. They're vulnerable, and they know it. We weren't planning to gloat. That wasn't why we created legacy equity. But watching them stumble over mistakes we'd spent years protecting them from, it hit differently. They hadn't just fired experience. They'd fired foresight. 2 days later. The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the voice on the other end stopped me cold. Delaney, this is Warren McCall, from Unified Logistics. Warren had been one of Novantum's most important enterprise clients, an old-school operator with global reach and no patience for failure. He and I had once spent 9 hours in a warehouse during a winter blackout, reworking a broken chain of custody report by flashlight. Heard through the grapevine you're consulting now, he said. I paused. That's not inaccurate. I've got a problem, he continued. And I don't want another AI presentation. I want someone who knows how the damn system works. It was the first call, but not the last. Over the next 10 days, we heard from 4 more clients, some current, some former. A few had already left Novantum. Others were quietly shopping for backup solutions. All of them had the same complaint: speed over substance, flash over function, and the same question: is Delaney still available? I brought it to the team. We met at Theo's apartment, papers spread across a glass coffee table, laptops glowing as evening fell. They're not just frustrated, Marcia said. They're scared, and they don't trust the new regime. Which means we don't just have opportunity, Theo added. We have leverage. Linda, ever the strategist, leaned in. We're not a consultancy, not yet, but maybe it's time we act like one. So we began offering informal advisories, quietly, selectively. No branding, no announcement, just real solutions to problems the new Novantum didn't know how to fix. We called it shadow service. No invoices, just relationships. We kept track of every issue they brought to us. Every error tied back to the systems we once maintained. Every shortcut that was now costing them millions. But we said nothing publicly, not yet. We let our work speak, like we always had. And the phone kept ringing. "If you're not working for them anymore," one client said, "then maybe they're not worth working with." It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when the fog lifts and you see the road ahead. Every pothole you once patched, now reopened, because they thought you were expendable. At the end of that week, Isaac turned to me during one of our check-ins. "You were right," he said. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked down at the notebook on my desk, where I'd scribbled something Michael once told me years ago. They won't realize what they lost until it costs them something they can't replace. And now, finally, the cost was starting to show. The call from Portlock Systems came on a Wednesday morning, just after 9 o'clock. I was reviewing our shadow service notes, discreet consultation requests we'd received from former Novantum clients, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. New York area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Ms. Cross?" a woman's voice said crisply. "This is Elise Camden, VP of Corporate Strategy at Portlock Systems. I was hoping you had a moment." Portlock was no minor player. They were a rising force in the AI automation space, flush with venture funding, ambitious, and aggressive. I'd heard whispers that they were scouting for logistics support. And apparently, they'd heard whispers about us too. "Legacy Equity," Elise said, "has a reputation for being unconventional and effective. We'd like to talk acquisition." She didn't mince words. I didn't either. "That depends," I replied. "Are you looking to buy us out or build something that lasts?" There was a pause, just long enough to signal I'd caught her off script. "Our board is open to different configurations," she said carefully, "but our first instinct is acquisition. You've built a powerful team, senior, experienced, technically brilliant. That's not easy to find in this climate." Senior. That was a polite way of saying old. "We're not a relic," I said. "We're the reason most of Novantum still runs at all." "Exactly," Elise replied, "which is why we want to bring you in-house. Infrastructure's been our Achilles heel. We need systems thinkers. Legacy Equity fits the bill." I told her I'd meet the next day. We gathered in a sleek conference room on the 23rd floor of Portlock's downtown headquarters. Glass walls, mid-century chairs, a view of the Hudson so clear it almost distracted from the whiteboard covered in projections. They offered us a clean buyout, 7 figures, full integration of our team, optional advisory roles post-acquisition. I looked around the table at my people, Marcia, Carl, Isaac, Linda, Raj, Theo. Every one of them had built something that Portlock wanted. Every one of them had once been called outdated. Then I said something no one expected. "We're not for sale." A ripple of silence. "Not because we don't value your offer," I added quickly. "It's generous, but you don't need to buy us. You need to build with us." Elise leaned forward. "Go on." "What if we don't fold into Portlock?" I said. "What if we partner, with a shared target in mind?" "And what would that target be?" I met her eyes. "Novantum." The room stilled. "They're vulnerable," I said. "You know it. We know it. Their tech rollout failed. Their clients are fleeing. They're hiding losses. And worse, they don't have a fix." "And you do?" Elise asked, more curious than skeptical. "We don't just have a fix. We built the original machine. We know the weaknesses because we engineered the strengths. We're not the opposition. They are." "You're proposing a merger," she said slowly. "One where Portlock acquires Novantum, and Legacy Equity leads the integration." "Exactly," I replied. You bring the capital, we bring the blueprint. We turn their mess into your momentum. It didn't take long. They asked questions, sharp ones. We had answers. Raj showed them projected savings if Novantum's infrastructure was properly restored. Carl mapped out how their AI could actually scale with the right logistics backbone. Isaac pointed out gaps in their back-end integrations that matched Novantum's exact weaknesses. By the time Elise stood up, her tone had shifted. If you can draw up a framework, she said, we'll back it. But legacy leads the approach, from pitch to planning. Deal, I said, extending my hand. She shook it. Welcome to the future, she said. No, I said quietly. We're just correcting the past. As we rode the elevator down, Theo nudged me. You just turned down 7 figures. We're not here to sell, I said. We're here to remind them who the builders really were. And finally, for the first time in weeks, I felt it, not anger, not grief, momentum. Momentum is a fragile thing. One moment, we were walking out of Portlock's headquarters with the wind at our backs. The next, we were staring down a hole in our budget deep enough to swallow the entire deal. It happened fast. Too fast. We were 2 weeks into due diligence. The merger framework was in place. Portlock's legal team had started structuring the acquisition terms. Our lawyers had begun prepping legacy system reports to present to Novantum's board. Everything was in motion. Then Raj got the call. He didn't say much when he hung up, just looked at me and said, "We need to meet, tonight." That night, we gathered at my house. Nobody touched the coffee. The air felt heavier than it had during our first meeting months ago. Like the dream we'd built was suddenly sinking through the floorboards. Raj clicked open his laptop and projected a new spreadsheet. Genesis Capital just pulled out, he said. They're withdrawing their $8.6 million commitment. I blinked. Why? They're citing market volatility and our team profile. You mean our age? Marcia said flatly. Raj didn't respond. That's nearly a third of our merger fund, Theo said. We don't have backup capital for that scale. They were our anchor, Linda added. Their name brought credibility to the table. I leaned forward, steady but sharp. Does this jeopardize the Portlock partnership? Raj hesitated. Not yet, but we have 6 days to secure the shortfall. After that, the deal stalls and confidence collapses. No one spoke for a long time. Isaac finally broke the silence. Then maybe we don't move forward. Everyone turned toward him. Delaney, he said gently, maybe this is the moment we cut our losses. We've already proven our value. We can pivot, consult, build slower, smarter. I shook my head. This isn't just a business move. It's a correction of who gets remembered and who gets rewritten. He leaned in, brows furrowed. Don't do anything reckless. Too late. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, dropped it on the table. It was a deed. My house. I took a bridge loan this morning, I said, against my property. Isaac sat back, stunned. You mortgaged your house? 30% of the gap, covered. The rest we'll solve. You didn't even talk to us first. Because I knew what you'd say, I replied, voice tightening, and I couldn't afford to hear it. Carl exhaled slowly. You're betting your future on this. No, I said. I'm betting on ours. I looked around the room, at the people who'd once been sidelined, underestimated, discarded, people who had quietly rebuilt their worth in the shadows, who had followed me not out of revenge, but belief. I'd rather lose everything, I said softly, than let them write the story without us. That landed. It wasn't some rousing speech, just the truth. And it settled deep. Marcia nodded first. We fill the rest through second-tier pledges. If we lower our take-home, we can stretch. Theo tapped his calculator. It's tight, but doable, Linda added. I have a client in Boston, a woman-led venture fund, quiet but aggressive. They've backed older founders before. Make the call, I said. Isaac didn't say anything for a while. Then he walked over, picked up the deed, folded it carefully, and set it back in front of me. Next time, he said, we all jump together. I nodded. Next time. The next morning, we sent a revised funding roadmap to Portlock. No panic, just numbers, solid and backed. The kind of solution only people who've seen real failure know how to deliver. That afternoon, Elise called. We were concerned, she admitted. So were we, I said. But concern doesn't shake us, it sharpens us. She paused. Understood. You're still leading this. We never stopped. But for one terrifying moment, I'd felt the floor collapse beneath us. And now, I knew legacy wouldn't be built on safety. It would be built on faith. I thought we'd accounted for every angle. After patching the funding gap, we had a new roadmap, stronger than the one before. Portlock was steady. Our team was solid. We had momentum again. Then the email arrived. It was short, no greeting, no sign-off. Just a single line in the subject line. They're lying to the board. I can prove it. And beneath it, 2 words that stopped my breath. G. Mathers. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Gerald Mathers had been on Novantum's board for over 20 years. He retired, or so I thought, just a few months before I was pushed out. He was one of the last of the old guard. A quiet but razor-sharp presence in every strategic meeting. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened, including me. I clicked open the message. Inside was a single attachment, a password-protected PDF and a note. If you're serious about changing the ending, meet me at Leland's, noon tomorrow. Use your middle name as the password. I downloaded the file and typed in Eloise. The document opened with a confidentiality warning, followed by pages of internal emails, metadata logs, and shareholder proxy records. As I scrolled, the pieces began falling into place. Eli hadn't just been consolidating power. He'd been leaking client data, massive behavioral data sets, to a third-party analytics firm in Singapore. Not for service improvement, for market modeling. Without consent. It was buried behind shell corporations, masked through anonymized licensing agreements. But it was there, signed, approved, and time-stamped. And the kicker? He'd diverted the revenue to a private holding account, not listed on Novantum's ledgers. I closed the file. My hands were steady, but my breath wasn't. The next day, I found myself in the back booth of Leland's, a diner tucked behind an old gas station 3 miles off the main road. The place hadn't changed in decades. Neither had the man sitting across from me. Gerald Mathers looked older, but his eyes were still sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He nodded once as I sat. I've been watching, he said. You've got more loyalty around you now than Eli ever built in that glass castle. Why now? I asked. Why come forward? He sipped his black coffee before answering. Because I didn't retire, he said. I was pushed, quietly, right before Eli made his play. He slid a small envelope across the table. I kept a few logins. Maybe I wasn't ready to walk away. Inside the envelope, credentials, access to Novantum's internal data vault, the kind only board members could request, under audit protection. You think the board will listen to this? I asked. No, he said. But they'll listen when it's brought up under voting procedure, on record. I looked at him. Why help me? He didn't blink. Because you built it, Delaney, and he's tearing it apart for personal gain. The company needs a reckoning, and if you're the one to lead it, then I'm ready. He leaned in slightly. When you walk into that boardroom, I'll vote with you. It wasn't a promise. It was a trigger. I left the diner with the envelope in my coat pocket, my mind reeling but my resolve firmer than ever. We weren't just planning a return. Now, we had an insider, a ghost in the system. And Eli? He had no idea the walls were about to shift underneath him. The elevator ride to the 24th floor was silent. Not even the hum of air conditioning. Just my own heartbeat, steady but slow, like a drum warming up for war. I held the folder tightly in my hand. Merger offer, urgent, stamped in red across the front. Outside the elevator, a junior associate glanced up from her phone, then did a double take. "Ms. Cross?" she stammered. You have a meeting?" "I do now," I said. I walked the hall like I had for 27 years, back straight, steps measured, same marble tiles, same chrome fixtures. But everything else had changed. The air didn't carry respect anymore. It smelled of fear. I reached the double doors of the boardroom. The placard still read Executive Session, Private. I pushed them open without knocking. 12 people turned toward me. At the head of the table sat Eli Bardem, polished as ever, in a graphite gray suit, a clicker in hand. A holographic display projected behind him. "Delaney?" he said, eyes narrowing. "This is a closed session." "Not anymore." I stepped forward and placed the folder on the center of the conference table. "You'll want to read that, immediately." The room froze. Eli's smirk cracked for just a second. Then he straightened. "This is highly inappropriate. Security won't stop this." My voice was even. "But the shareholders might." I glanced toward Gerald Mathers, seated 2 chairs down. He didn't say a word, just gave the slightest nod. My cue. I turned to face the room. "That," I said, pointing to the folder, "is a merger offer, structured, funded, backed by Portlock Systems and Legacy Equity. The deal is clean, the intention is corrective, and the timeline is now." Before Eli could respond, a chime interrupted the room. One of the IT liaisons seated near the back looked up, pale. I think something's wrong," he said, pressing into his tablet. The projection behind Eli blinked, then froze. A red error message replaced the demo screen. "Critical routing failure. Live session terminated." Someone in the room cursed under their breath. "Wasn't this streaming to our investors?" asked a board member near the far end. Eli turned, fumbling for the clicker, sweat breaking at the edge of his collar. "We're fixing it. It's not just anything," I said flatly. "It's the system you replaced us for, the one we told you wouldn't scale under stress." The silence that followed was different now. Taut. Dangerous. Every pair of eyes that had been fixed on the demo now shifted to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. "You fired experience. You promoted noise. And now you're hemorrhaging clients, investor confidence, and credibility." Eli stepped forward, trying to reassert control. "Delaney, this is not your platform. This is a board conversation." "That's exactly what this is," I interrupted. "And I'm here because our proposal is the only thing standing between you and collapse." Another board member opened the folder. Papers rustled. Portlock's logo gleamed at the top of the executive summary. Gerald finally spoke. "I move we table all agenda items and proceed directly to discussion of the merger offer." Eli froze. No one seconded. Not yet. But they didn't object either. I stood my ground, cold, certain. I wasn't here to gloat. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here because I refused to let them destroy what we built and walk away with the pieces. They had tried to erase me. Now I was the one holding the pen. And the next page was already written. There's a silence that comes after a room's center has shifted. I stood there, hands by my side, watching as the board shuffled through the folder I'd placed on the table. No one was talking. No one was laughing. The system demo had crashed minutes earlier. Now. The only thing left standing was truth, and the truth was printed in black ink on that paper. Portlock systems, legacy equity, conditional merger terms, proposed leadership transitions, and, most importantly, the list of stakeholders backing the proposal. Gerald cleared his throat. "Before we move forward," he said, "the board requests full transparency regarding legacy equities investors. Who, exactly, is behind this?" I didn't hesitate. 7 people, I said, all former Novantum employees, all pushed out, silenced, or written off in the past 5 years. I paused. "You called us outdated. We called each other." A few heads lifted, a few backs straightened. Marcia Briggs, Carl DeWitt, Linda Kaplan, Isaac Legrand, Raj Mehra, Theo Washington, myself. Eli shifted uncomfortably. His knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. "With respect," he said, "none of you are majority shareholders. You lack voting power." I smiled. Just barely. "True, but we didn't need control. We needed capital. Which brings us to your next question. Where did the funding come from?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a separate packet. Smaller, tighter. Portlock provided part of it. Yes. But the initial seed fund, what got this off the ground, came from an account you know very well. I laid the packet down. The Novantum Employee Retirement Trust. Gasps broke the silence. One of the newer board members leaned forward. "That's a 401k pool." "Correct," I said. "We withdrew our vested portions after separation. You thought we'd take our checks and fade into the background. Instead, we reinvested in ourselves." Eli scoffed. "That's a stretch. You're saying your pension money is backing a merger?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm saying your legacy built ours. You used it to clean the slate. We used it to write a better chapter." Gerald opened the packet, scanned the contents, match-to-match withdrawals, portfolio tracking, an internal memo, dated and time-stamped, showing Raj's access to performance reports through his retained shareholder status. All clean, all legal, all undeniable. "We're not here to punish," I continued. "This isn't retaliation. This is redemption. You spent years devaluing people the moment their experience stopped trending." I looked Eli in the eye. "But the truth is, systems don't run on charisma. They run on structure. And we are that structure." He leaned forward, but I held up a hand. "You don't have to agree with us, but you will read the proposal. You will answer for the client loss, the data exposure, the financial bleed." I stepped back from the table. "We're not trying to burn Novantum down. We're trying to keep it from collapsing. This is your chance to steady it." Gerald finally closed the folder and looked around the room. "We'll proceed with a formal review. Immediately." No one objected. I turned toward the door. I didn't need to stay and watch the scramble. That moment, the silence I'd carried for so long, had finally broken. And it wasn't with shouting. It was with fact, proof, and precision. As I left the room, I caught my reflection in the glass wall, shoulders back, chin steady. They thought they could silence me, instead. They handed me the mic. The board reconvened the next morning. Same room, same chairs. But the energy had changed. No tech demos, no flashy projections, just folders, ballots, and tension thick enough to crush the silence. 12 members sat at the table. Gerald at the center, Eli to his right. I stood near the far wall, not a seat, not a title, but the only person in the room whose presence now anchored everything. The proposal had been circulated. No edits, no watering down. A full-scale merger. Legacy equity at the helm of infrastructure restructuring. Portlock would absorb the digital assets. We would rebuild the systems from the inside out. And Eli? He would be reassigned to a non-operational advisory role. His name would remain, but not his authority. A thin man in wire-rimmed glasses, Andrew Latham, head of the compensation committee, read the terms aloud, line by line. No one interrupted. When he finished, Gerald nodded. We proceed to vote. 12 cards, anonymous, folded and placed in the center envelope. 12 seconds, each more suffocating than the last. When the last card dropped, the envelope was sealed. Gerald opened it with deliberate calm and began counting. 6 in favor. Pause. 6 against. The room didn't react. No gasps, no murmurs. But the tension was absolute. A tie meant delay. Delay meant uncertainty. Uncertainty meant Eli would survive long enough to spin a new narrative. I couldn't let that happen. I stood up. Not abruptly, not theatrically, just quietly. Before you close the session, I said, I'd like to say one thing. Gerald nodded. I looked around the table. Not all faces were familiar. Some were newer board members brought in during Eli's expansion phase. Investors who valued growth at all costs. Metrics over meaning. But 3 of them? I'd worked with them, mentored their teams, guided their decisions through recessions, regulatory storms, and brutal turnover. And one of them, Harriet Vaughn, had voted against me. She hadn't made eye contact since I entered the room. I know what's happening here, I began. Some of you see this proposal as a risk, as a return to the past, as sentiment over strategy. I paused. But let me ask you something. What has trending ever bought you that longevity didn't already build? I walked a few steps closer to the table. You fired wisdom because it didn't trend fast enough, and now you're trending toward collapse. Silence. Then, a chair scraped softly against the floor. Harriet stood up. She didn't speak. She didn't look at Eli. She simply reached into the envelope, pulled out her folded card, and slid a new one in its place. Let the record reflect, she said. My vote is yes. Gerald nodded. Vote amended. A beat passed, then another. He read the new count aloud. 7 in favor, 5 against. That was it. No applause. No celebration. Just the sound of the center shifting again. Eli didn't speak. His eyes were locked on the table. Hands clenched. A man watching the last move he didn't expect. I turned to Harriet. She finally met my eyes. You deserved better, she said. We all did. I nodded. Thank you. The board began to adjourn. Legal teams would follow. Terms would be formalized. The merger was official. I walked out into the hallway alone. No cameras, no press. Just the sound of my heels clicking on the tile. Familiar, but different. Because this time, I wasn't returning to the company. I was returning it to itself. The resignation was announced on a Monday, a short statement, tucked between headlines about quarterly earnings and leadership transitions. No press conference, no farewell tour, just a single sentence. Eli Bardem has stepped down from his role as CEO of Novantum, effective immediately. He left the building the same way I once had, quietly, without ceremony. His legacy folded into a sealed envelope and walked out the door. But unlike him, I didn't come to replace, I came to restore. The board offered me the position. Of course, interim CEO, full authority, a chance to put my name above the door that once shut me out. I thanked them. Then I declined. We're not here to rule, I told the board. We're here to rebuild, in our own name. Some didn't understand at first. Others nodded before I finished the sentence. Because this was never about power. It was about reclaiming voice, rewriting the story others tried to finish without us. And for me, that story wasn't just professional, it was personal. I thought of the women I'd mentored, who were told to step aside gracefully. The engineers who stopped getting invited to brainstorming sessions once they hit 50. The brilliant minds asked to train their replacements while being eased toward the door. So I did something for them. 2 weeks after the merger was finalized, we held a press event. not for legacy equity or portlock systems, but for something new. I stepped onto the stage at a modest tech forum in Chicago. No lights, no broadcast cameras, just a room filled with people who had once been overlooked. We called it the Second Act Fund, I announced. It's dedicated to women in technology over the age of 50, those who've been pushed aside, counted out, or told their best ideas expired with their last job title. I paused. It's not a handout, it's a reintroduction, a declaration that value doesn't vanish with age. It deepens. The room was silent, not because they were unimpressed, but because they were listening the way people do when someone finally says what they've been waiting to hear. We launched with an initial endowment seeded from our merger equity. 7 founding fellows would receive full funding, mentorship, and, more than anything else, visibility. Each of them had been let go from firms that now pretended they never existed. And now, they were building again. After the event, I returned to Legacy Equity's new offices, smaller than Novantum's old tower, but warmer, shared desks, whiteboards, coffee mugs with inside jokes, and walls that told stories. I walked past our central hall, where a bronze panel had just been installed. It read, Founders of Legacy Equity, Delaney Cross, Marcia Briggs, Carl DeWitt, Linda Kaplan, Isaac Legrand, Raj Mehra, Theo Washington. 7 names, 7 people who were once discarded, now etched in metal. I stood there for a long moment, hand resting against the panel, fingers brushing over the grooves of each name. This wasn't revenge. This was recognition. We hadn't won by fighting louder. We'd won by refusing to disappear. Behind me, I heard laughter, Theo and Linda joking with 2 of our new junior engineers, both women in their late 50s, both recently hired after being let go for not keeping pace with culture. Here, they weren't behind. They were finally right on time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the door. I just waited and returned with something they never saw coming, a better version of the future. This story isn't just about me. It's about all of us who've been told our time was up, who were called too old, too slow, or not a cultural fit. If that's ever happened to you, then I hope my journey reminds you, experience is not a liability, it's leverage. We're not here to rule. We're here to rebuild on our terms. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is show up when they least expect it, and remind them who built the foundation they're standing on. If this story moved you, even just a little, I'd love to hear what part hit home. Was it the silence? The twist? The moment everything turned? Drop a comment below. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, please give the video a like, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth, and subscribe to the channel, because your second act might just be your legacy.